thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real pleasure because I always feel that when I read someone's book that I have some kind of connection. It's a very intimate feeling, and then actually speaking to the author is a very special thing.
Well, it's my honor, and I thank you for reading my book.
Yeah, it was great. I came across your book when I was looking for female sexuality books in online, and then I just saw Becoming Cliterate, and I thought, what a great title. So I bought it immediately. So would you like to tell us what Becoming Cliterate means exactly?
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to. So Becoming Cliterate is a play on words, and it is about being literate or knowledgeable about the clitoris, which is the main and most important organ for female sexual pleasure.
Fantastic. So what inspired you to actually write it?
What inspired me was my students, to be frank with you. I teach human sexuality to about 150 students a year, and when I was teaching them about female pleasure, female genital anatomy, the orgasm gap and the pain behind it really came to light for me, that my women students were really struggling to orgasm. My male students were saying, like, I don't know how to make a woman orgasm, quote, and none of them knew about the clitoris. Like, the vast majority thought, from watching a combination of our lacking sex ed system here and pornography, which I'm not against, but it's bad role modeling. Mm-hmm. They really thought they were supposed to orgasm from intercourse. So I started sort of teaching even more details to close the orgasm gap, and I would get notes from my students saying, thanks to your class, I'm orgasmic. Thanks to your class, my girlfriend's orgasmic. And I thought, I can't believe that this whole body of knowledge that I learned in the 60s, during my coming of age, if you will, had been lost to a whole generation. And so I thought, I need to get this out there beyond my one classroom. And that's what inspired me to write Becoming Cliterate.
Fantastic. So what inspired you to actually become a sex therapist in the first place? I read that you've got over 25 years experience. So what inspired you to take this route?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, I always knew I wanted to be a psychologist, and I received no training in sexuality, as most psychologists or physicians don't, unfortunately. But I was always comfortable with the topic, probably because of the way my mother raised me, and knew it was a very important part of well-being in life. So I would always ask my clients, like, anything about your sex life you want to talk about? And the reply was always almost yes, but if you wouldn't have asked, I wouldn't have told you. And so that inspired me to do a deeper dive and get into this area.
Fantastic. So going back to orgasms during penetration, I saw your TED Talk yesterday, and you said that how can I have an orgasm during penetration was the number one question that you received from women. And in your book, I saw a very interesting pie chart about the female orgasm that showed that only 4% of women climax irregularly through intercourse alone. Do you think there's any way that this percentage could increase, or is it just the wrong organ?
I think that it's the wrong organ.
Okay.
I mean, some people will, I really take issue with, like, sex educators and, doctors or social media influencers who say, oh, I can do this, so you can too. Just relax, or do this or do that. And for some women, most women, it's really a biological impossibility. Their clitoris is not getting stimulated enough through penetration, despite the fact that, yes, penetration does stimulate the internal clitoris. Most women need external clitoral stimulation, either alone or coupled with penetration. So yes, I think we could increase that, but only by including clitoral stimulation, because the pie chart you're referring to is studies I've done over, many years with thousands of my students, asking them anonymously, what's your most reliable route to orgasm? And that only 4% say penetration alone. The rest either don't orgasm or say clitoral stimulation alone or clitoral stimulation coupled with penetration.
Fantastic. So I also saw on your TED Talk that you discussed how magazines address the subject of orgasm during penetration with article titles such as Best Positions for a Guaranteed Orgasm During Penetration and similar. Speaking of magazines, I personally got my sex education from sex columns in women's magazines because when I was growing up, I went to Catholic schools, Catholic education, so that the female orgasm and clitoris are not part of the vocabulary, as you might imagine. And then in
Yes.
magazines, I was reading things like women were either clitoral or vaginal. What do you think of this? I mean, are there clitoral orgasms, vaginal orgasms? What do you think about blended orgasms?
Okay, so that whole idea of vaginal versus clitoral orgasms goes all the way back to Freud, who is the one who first, distinguished clitoral and vaginal orgasms. And he said, and this caused harm that we're still dealing with today, he said that once a woman is mature, she will transfer her feelings from her clitoris to her vagina. That's like saying when you're mature, you'll start breathing out of your ears instead of your nose. I mean, it's just insane. We don't transfer, our feelings from one organ to the other. In terms of what do I think about the distinction, are there different kinds, clitoral, vaginal, blended, G-spot orgasms? This is an area I address in my book very briefly. And basically what I say there is we don't know the answer to that. Scientists are still debating it. And there's different camps. So one camp says, yes, there are different types of orgasms. And they say the evidence for that is A, women say they feel different, and B, the vagina and clitoris go to the brain through a different nerve pathway. So they say, yes, there's different kinds. The other camp says all orgasms are clitoral, no matter where the stimulation occurs, because the clitoris is involved regardless of where you're being stimulated. So they say all orgasms are clitoral. And then there's another camp that says, really, we should stop asking this question because there aren't different parts of women's genitals. It's just one big unit, and we should stop making this distinction based on biology. And then there's another way of thinking, which is, why is this question so important in the first place? Like, unless you're a scientist trying to help women with a spinal cord injury, orgasm, or just curious, but why is this scientifically, but why is this so important to the popular press and to women? And it is the answer to that. Like, we don't ask, are there different types of male orgasms? That you don't see that question as much in the literature or in the popular press, I'm sorry. And so, it's only when it comes to women's orgasms that we distinguish types, and by doing so, declare one superior over the other, and one is a better goal to strive for. So what I would say is, scientifically, we don't know the answer, but culturally, I think we have to examine, why is this question so important?
I think it's important. I think maybe people are seeing that in porn. Obviously, it's fake, but then they're just they're seeing a massive difference between what's on the screen and what's in their bed, perhaps.
Oh, that's true. Yes, which is the source of so much pain. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I must confess that I am part of the 4%. So I always felt very lucky when I was reading all these things in women's magazines, when I was discovering my sexuality, that I can have an orgasm from penetration alone. And for me, it just seems to be easier and faster than with clitoral stimulation. And so I discovered this the second time I had penetration. So it was completely like mind blowing. But then as I was reading these magazines that were telling me I was clitoral or vaginal, then I ignored my clitoris for a long, long, long time. And even during cunnilingus, I would say after a while, even though it was nice, like, yeah, stop, just let's have sex now. Let's have penetration now. And then I got my first rabbit vibrator in my late 20s. And that was just, oh my God, I had an orgasm from clitoral stimulation. And it was so mind blowing, because it was kind of liberating on an emotional level as well as physical, because before that time, I was kind of relying on maybe men for orgasms, and sometimes that meant toxic relationships. So I just felt this kind of like sexual dependence on men. And so do you think that becoming cliterate can be a transformative experience for most women?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your experience. And it is, I was very aware when I wrote Becoming Cliterate that I certainly didn't want to make the 4%, feel that something's wrong with them. But your story tells me a bit that two things, and then I will answer your question, that, it's no matter how we orgasm or what our bodies do, there's always some sense of, am I okay? Whether you're in the 4% or the 96%. I mean, women are so socialized, right, to question if we're okay. So I'm glad you still found my book really useful, even though it was really aimed at the 96% who thought they should be in the 4%, not the 4% who, wondered about the 96%. But yes, I think it can be liberating for anyone, because I do hope that the message I gave in the book is however you orgasm is fine, and stop feeling like there's something wrong with you. And also, I hope it gave other women what it sounds like it gave you, which is just sort of permission to embrace your body more and whatever it does. And, for you, it sounds like you discovered blended orgasms, the rabbit vibrator, or what is called blended orgasms, or stimulation through both the clitoris and the vagina.
What happened with me though is my rabbit actually broke because I
no.
thought I needed blended orgasms, blended stimulation, shall we say. And then I used the kind of other toy, because when you use the same thing over and over again, you get used to it. And then so I was kind of forced in the nicest possible way to actually use some of my other toys that I found I thought were unsuccessful until that moment. So the situation I was put in made me discover, let's say, bullet vibrators and kind of pebble types, where I found that I was having orgasms just from external stimulation. I just found it so liberating, because in the past I'd always rushed people with cunnilingus, just to kind of get to the penetration part. Or I was with toxic guys, like I think a lot of women are in that situation where they're in a relationship because the sex is really good, but the guy's toxic emotionally. So I felt liberated from those types of situations when I knew that I could give myself that incredible pleasure. So
yes. Oh, that's great. No, it's not strange at all. It's wonderful. It's like you learn to rely on yourself,
Yeah.
And that you did that by discovering, by having your vibrator break and finding other ways. I think that's fabulous. That is such a great story.
But do you find with other women who become cliterate that it's a really transformative experience on other levels, not just physical, but like emotionally, perhaps?
Oh, thank you for bringing me back to that topic. Yes, I cannot tell you how many women have told me that after becoming cliterate, after learning their bodies and embracing their bodies and feeling empowered, that not only did they feel happier in the bedroom, but that it had ripple effects. I've had women say they felt more confident at work, at school, in general conversations, that it was their confidence in the bedroom spilled out to the rest of their life, and their empowerment in the bedroom led to empowerment outside of the bedroom.
Fantastic. So not just me then. So according to your book, also some more interesting stats. I read that heterosexual hookup sex seems to be very unsatisfactory for women. So what did you discover exactly?
That is the place where women are having the least orgasms. So basically the orgasm gap is, this finding across multiple studies that in heterosexual sex, women have fewer orgasms than men, and nowhere is that statistic more dismal than in hookup sex. That in my research, I found that, interestingly, only 4% of women orgasm during hookup sex. And I didn't say this in the book because it was too complicated to try to explain, But I do this study every year. I ask, what's your most reliable route to orgasm? And then months later in the class, I do this poll about, do you orgasm during hookup sex? And 4% is the average. But what has fascinated me over the years is that if, say, in one class, 2% of women say their most reliable route to orgasm is penetration, in that same class 2 months later, 2% will say they orgasm with hookup sex. Same with 3%, 4%. So basically, what does that tell us? Like, there is very little attention to women's pleasure, to clitoral stimulation during hookup sex. It's all about the penetration. And because of that, it's the most dismal statistics of all. In my study, as I think I just said, 4% of women versus 55% of men say they orgasm during first-time hookup sex. And there's other studies with very similar statistics, like, 5%, 7% kind of thing.
Interesting. So we don't see much clitoral. I'm not really a porn consumer. I think it's quite strange, really. I just think it's all a bit too aggressive for me. But talking about porn, we don't see much clitoral stimulation in porn. What do you think the fellatio-cunnilingus ratio might be?
In porn or in general? I don't know about in porn. I can't answer that, but I can say there have been studies of women's orgasm in porn. And in fact, the orgasm gap exists there, that women are shown orgasming less than men. And if they do orgasm, it's usually shown via penetration. But I do know that there is an oral sex disparity in heterosexual relationships, particularly hookup relationships, that very few women are receiving oral sex in hookups and very many men are.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I saw an interview with a porn star a few years ago, a female porn star, and she just said that there is no cunnilingus in porn, which I thought was an interesting reflection. So going back to porn, so what do you think? Do you think porn influences clitoracy or lack of clitoracy? What role does it play?
Oh, such a good question. I think that it does, although it's here to stay. And honestly, I have nothing against porn. And sometimes I even recommend it to clients, who want to be visually aroused, who are having trouble getting aroused. And there's even feminist porn now. But like you, I'm not a big porn consumer. It's just not my thing. But I do think that it influences young people, especially because with a lack of sex education to correct the fact that, hey, this is acting, this is not real. Young people are getting their ideas about sex, their role models through porn, and young women come to expect orgasms through penetration, and young men come to expect and believe that their penis is the key to women's pleasure, and that they must learn to thrust hard and last long to, quote, give a woman an orgasm.
Definitely. And something else I really I'm glad you mentioned in your book was the vocabulary we use to refer to our genitals. And do you think this could be taught in childhood to kind of overcome the shame, because words are important? For example, many parents make up silly names when they teach their children about body parts. I know a friend who told her daughter that her genitals were called the Auntie Mary. I mean, isn't that weird?
Oh, God.
I have an Auntie Mary. That'd be just so weird,
Oh, my gosh, yes. No, I mean, thank you for bringing up the language piece, Venus, because honestly, that was my favorite chapter in the whole book, and the funnest to write. And I have so much passion about the language we use. And I think language reflects and perpetuates this problem. We use the word sex and intercourse synonymously, like they're the same, even though most women don't orgasm from intercourse. We use the term foreplay as if it's just a lead up to this big main event, even though those include the activities that are most likely to bring women to orgasm. And we call our entire genitals a vagina or some, and that erases our most pleasurable part, the clitoris. It's linguistically erases it. So yes, I think language is essential. And I think that if children were taught like without shame, and they are in the Netherlands, for example, that is just like this is your, just like this is your nose and this is your ear. You know,
exactly.
this is your vulva. This is in your vulva. You'll find your clitoris. You'll find your vaginal opening. Like, what is wrong with sharing it? Because it perpetuates the shame. It's so shameful that we can't even say it out loud. We have to
Yeah, I
call it
totally
Aunt
agree.
Mary, right? Yeah.
Because imagine, I mean, that girl is going to know by the time she's about 8 or 9 that it's not called Auntie Mary. And if she has an issue with that area, how is she going to talk about it with her mother or with a doctor or something? Because I think a lot of parents also don't know the words, don't know the word vulva. That we don't hear that word often enough. It's a vagina. I saw a program about naked dating once. I don't know if you've seen this program. It's called Naked Attraction, and the host said to the contestant, "So you like a shaved vagina then?" I was thinking, this is terrible. This is what people think. They
Right.
don't use
You
the vulva
cannot
enough.
shave a vagina. You can't
Exactly.
shave a vagina, right? In fact, Harriet Lerner, who's an author I greatly admire, years ago wrote an article about the vagina monologues, which is, I love Eve Ensler's work. I love the play. But she basically said, like, it isn't the vagina monologues. Like in the word vagina is used throughout there, and it doesn't make sense unless you substitute the right words. Because, for example, you don't shave a vagina. And I
Mm.
know some people think this is like, oh, you're splitting hairs, but what's named doesn't exist. And in fact, there's even people are uncomfortable with the word clitoris. And in fact, there was one study that even women who are comfortable just saying that word are more orgasmic, which makes sense, right? Because they're able to use that word and embrace it and, tell their partners what they like.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we don't have a word for it in childhood, then that translates to our intimate adult relationships, I think. Definitely.
Exactly. Exactly.
One thing I'm very curious about, because I'm a professional sex toy designer and reviewer and all of that. I've got 700 sex toys,
Oh my.
which is quite good.
Lucky you.
I've got a whole bedroom full of them, a spare bedroom. But I always get asked about this. Is dead vagina syndrome a thing? That is to say, can vibrators cause a decrease in vaginal sensitivity, or should that be clitoral sensitivity? But I saw in your book that you discussed clitoral sensitivity in rabbits, and that it actually increased with the use of rabbits, literally rabbit vibrators. It's a bit of a Freudian slip there, but yes. Do you think? What do you think about this dead vagina syndrome? And
Yeah, I think it's another way to scare women away from vibrators, which we know are very effective. We know vulvas respond incredibly well to vibration. People have been using vibrators for centuries in different forms or another. And no, I think it's, yes, if you use it too much, you could get a little numb. But you know what the solution to that is? You stop using it for a few minutes or an hour. It's sort of like, have you ever ridden your bike for too long, your rear end gets numb? What's the
mm,
solution to that? It's not riding your bike again. It's get off the bike and take a break. So no, I think that's another myth that is harmful to women's sexuality, because the research is so clear that women who use vibrators have easier and more frequent orgasms, and that a male partner's acceptance of his partner's vibrator usage is highly related to her sexual satisfaction.
absolutely. And for me, I only had my first orgasms through cunnilingus maybe 5-6 years ago, and it was just such an incredible moment, because I've been a sex blogger for 12 years. It's always nice to know that you don't know everything and you haven't experienced everything, so it was an incredible moment. And I think that was because of my clitoral stimulation through vibration and just getting to know my body on a different level. So
Yeah,
it's
you got
fantastic.
used to that
Mm.
type of stimulation. You learned to embrace it, and so you could then get that stimulation. I think that's, that's fantastic.
Great. And what advice would you give men who want to help their female partners become cliterate, but the female partners are unable to relax, let go, and enjoy it? Because I know a lot of men love cunnilingus. They are cunnilinguists, I like to call them, and they enjoy, they actually get aroused by performing oral sex, yet women can be maybe ashamed of the smell, the appearance, and all of those things. So it's kind of nice that there are guys like that. I've encountered
Yeah.
a few, and it's fantastic. But I
Yeah.
mean, what would you advise someone like that who's dying to kind of go down on his partner for half an hour and she's not relaxed?
I think, well, first of all, don't pressure her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, pressure and sex don't mix well. And if she's not comfortable with it, that's the first and foremost thing to respect. Second of all, a conversation out of the bedroom, because sometimes maybe, like you're saying, she might like it if she could let herself go. And to, a conversation out of the bedroom, like, I really like pleasuring you. I really like going down on you. This is like, I know you sometimes, say, end it, it's fine to, go stop. But, I like it. I'm happy to go as long as you want. I'd love to give you that pleasure, and just express that and see where that goes.
Fantastic. There was an episode of Sex and the City years ago when Miranda was complaining that the guy kissed her after going down on her. And I love that. I think it's really erotic. It's like,
yeah. and see, I think it's like, this is where it's so important to know that everybody loves something different, and there's no right or wrong. Like, and some people wouldn't like that. Some people find it incredibly erotic, and whatever works for you is fantastic. And it's a matter of communicating that to your partner.
Definitely. One thing I've noticed that's improved during my time as a sex blogger and also a sex toy user is that sex toy envy among straight men is actually getting better. I remember years ago when sex toys were more phallic, like the rabbit, there was a lot more sex toy envy, whereas now I think men are way more open to sharing sex toy experiences. What do you think about that? What's your opinion? Do you think it's improved?
I hope so. I certainly don't have any research, before or after, but I do see more. I think we still have a ways to go, but I do see more and more men embracing, being interested in using sex toys with their partners.
But then in some cases, having stronger orgasms with a sex toy than with a partner can be off-putting for some people because they might feel threatened by it. What advice would you give to someone in that situation they seem to be having a better time with the toy?
To the woman or the man or both?
Well, usually if it's the woman, I guess. I mean, that's the kind of, most sex toys are for women, I guess.
No, but I mean, like, the advice that I would give to men I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, so
because I was actually speaking to someone at the weekend about this, and he was fascinated by my career, and he said he would not like to see a woman enjoy a toy more than his dick.
see, that's what I was trying to get at. So that's so common. So let me address both. What I would say to women, which is the research, right? That, this is something that your vulva likes. The research is really clear. Clitorises respond incredibly well to vibration. And that's totally fine. The idea that you should stop shoulding on yourself. Stop saying, I should orgasm this way, I should orgasm that way. That's an idea that whose time it is to end. And if you enjoy orgasming with a vibrator, then keep doing it and bring it into your encounters. We don't tell men to stop orgasming through penile stimulation or intercourse or whatever their preferred mode is. It's only women where they find this really effective way, and we say, ooh, don't do that, you'll get addicted, or it's bad. And to men, I think it's a matter of education that, if they say, I don't want her to enjoy a vibrator more than my dick, they're still under the fallacy that their penises are essential to female pleasure. And that there's a great book called She Comes First by Ian Kerner, which is all about cunnilingus. And he does what I try to do as well, but from a male perspective and about oral sex, and really saying that once as a man you embrace and understand that women's key to pleasure is clitoral stimulation, that you can have better sex yourself because it takes off the pressure to thrust hard, last long, and that it takes away that this is some achievement that you need to do, and you can relax and enjoy sex more. And if the whole point is that you want your partner to be satisfied, why not have her be satisfied by what really satisfies her instead of some mythical thing that won't really work?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a fun to see. I mean, I was trying a male test sex toy last night, and I actually love seeing the reactions. I think it's real turn on. So now for some shorter questions. So it doesn't have to be related to sex, or it could be, depends. What is the book that changed your life?
Oh my gosh, what a question. The book that changed my life.
Well, it could be a few.
Are you talking about in my childhood or my adult life?
Or in general, it could be anything, a book that had a huge impact on you. I'm really into reading, you see, so I'm going to have a reading part.
So this is so, okay. When I was a kid, my mother, who is now passed away, had a book that was her favorite. I mean, I don't even know if you can get it anymore, but she read it so many times and she gave it to me. And I think I don't even remember the details of it, but I remember the name, Marjorie Morningstar. And that had a great impact on me. I think it just made me like to read. And then another book that I love, that I think was my favorite book ever, is The Color of Water.
Oh, sounds nice.
Actually, it's actually a story of a Black man who was raised by his white mother. It's an autobiographical memoir. And it just was a powerful, powerful book. So that I remember. I mean, there's so many, but I think I'll stop there.
Oh, cool. So what was the last book you read, or what are you reading now? Do you like to read?
I do like, I'll be honest with you, since I have been writing so much, I don't read as much because I spend all the day in front of the computer. When I get in bed at night, I literally want to watch a kind of mindless TV show rather than read. So I generally read on vacations, and I usually alternate between some fiction and nonfiction book. And the sex book I'm currently reading right now is by Ian Kerner, called Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. I am also currently, I'd have to get my Kindle to tell you what the other book I'm reading is. That's how bad my memory is. So nothing, that's the one that comes to me right now that I am reading.
Fantastic. I'll check it out because I'm always reading. And some advice for our audience. How can our audience live a more orgasmic lifestyle?
Basically, I think that if you define orgasm as pleasure and in mindful pleasure, right? Because to have an orgasm requires embracing pleasure, and it also requires you to stop analyzing, stop thinking, just be in the moment, put your mind and body in the same place. Like, notice when your mind wanders and instead bring it back to the present moment. So I think the best advice for living an orgasmic life is 1, embrace pleasure, 2, practice mindfulness, and 3, in terms of orgasms in general, especially for women, like, embrace your clitoris, explore your body, get to know it, call it by the right name, get this. And if we're talking about heterosexual women, get the same type of pleasure, the same type of stimulation alone with a partner as you get alone. Many of us will, stimulate ourselves externally alone and then expect to orgasm from penetration when with a man. So it's just a simple tip. Get the same type of stimulation alone and with a partner as you do alone, including bring your vibrator in. So attitude, mindfulness, and targeted stimulation.
Fantastic advice. So where can people find you? Would you like to tell us your
Thank you for
Instagram?
asking. Yes, thank you. My handle on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook is all the same, and it's the same as my website, which is Dr. Laurie Mintz, DrLaurieMintz. My website is www.drlauriemintz.com. And if you go there, you'll find links to my books, you'll find links to my social media, etc.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me today. It's a huge honor, and I'm so glad it all worked out. So thank you so much.
Thank you for interviewing me. It was so delightful to talk to you. Thank you.